this is really long because it's a bunch of presentations kind of jammed together, actually. It's a bunch of thoughts I've been doing over the last 2 years or so presenting stuff, especially since I started working on the book and sharing all the information out there, which is another one. You don't have to buy the book. There's a wiki with everything updated all the time. So if you want to know anything right now, just go look at it. So I've been working, I've had a couple different things I've presented at various conferences around designing, well, much like has just been talked by Aaron, designing for multiple experiences all jammed together, and I can't see my notes, so I guess I'll just fake it, and making development processes work better for yourself and so forth. So I'm trying to jam all these together into one thing because I realize as I talk through at various events, as I blog and stuff, they've started becoming kind of one theme. A bunch of these kind of work well together. And so I'm kind of getting a philosophy deeper than just design around making mobile experiences better. First thing I usually get asked, though, when we get tactical, which always happens when we start, presenting these things, the questions end up being quite tactical, is, okay, what platform are we building for? Well, okay, you actually need to back up, and we're going to talk a lot about backing up and dealing things at higher levels, but I'll start by answering it just so as a baseline thing, which is build a mobile website. There's a bunch of reasons. They go really detailed, and it varies a great deal depending on what your product is. But there's some basic goodness around it. My key one, we can talk about a little bit, discoverability. So there's a way into stuff. It's really scalable. It's universal access, even the desktop. Even if you don't build a desktop version, it works. It's a website still. Access, so you need it if you have an app store. But my favorite one is I want to say accessibility, but that's the wrong word now. Analytics. You can launch that out there and tell what people are actually using. You can look at the actual use rates instead of guessing or going, well, all my friends have an iPhone, so we'll launch for the iPhone. Good enough. But still, what website? Okay, you have an iPhone. I have a pile of them over there, several different ones, in fact. So you build it, obviously, because everybody has one, right? So you build it at the right resolution for the handset you have in your hands, and you build it with all little WebKit widgets to make sure it works great in mobile Safari, and that's fine, right? It's a website, of course it'll work. You put that out there, it's gonna look great, you might even get good reviews depending on who you're going towards. But you look at those analytics and you're going to find that everybody coming to it is using, well, 90% are using iOS. The reason is you've built an iOS website. Even those matter. You have to target universally the audience. And you'll see that. If you then go fix it and make it work for everybody, then you might only get 65% iOS visitors in the US at least. Depends on what region you're in. You have to, well, anyway, besides building, you have to pay attention to the information that you actually have available to you. So here, this is why I brought the pile of phones. I have several, but here, these two. I have two of these iPod Touches that I use for a lot of testing. Why the hell would I have two of them? Well, occasionally it's nice to compare, but mostly because this one's now useless. It doesn't run above iOS 3.2, I think, for no reason I can decipher. But if you look at the very popular chart that says Android has got a wildly fragmented OS base, you would never know that. You would assume iOS works and everything, so therefore we can launch our products on iOS 5 or I guess 6 now, right? Because everybody immediately upgrades, right? So it doesn't matter. And you'd miss out on all these secondary market things. If you're targeting youth who are getting hand-me-down devices, or even in some industry they use hand-me-down devices on the Wi-Fi only, and suddenly, it doesn't work when you do the upgrade, those people stop using your product. So you need to do the right, actually I need to see my notes, make sure I'm not missing anything. Oh, I got ahead, that was it. So, okay. Even aside from that, the last dozen or so projects, so stats-wise, the last dozen or so app projects I've worked on, and I didn't look this up, so it's off the top of my head, so I could be lying, but only one of them was targeted first for iOS as an app. And that wasn't my choice. It wasn't because the whole team carries Android and I like lots of phones and I said, we're going to look really hard. It's out there in the wild that the product owners are starting to be serious about things. They're not building mobile because they think it's cool. They're building it to meet goals and objectives and make money and increase sales and make sure that the product actually wins and we can pay back the VCs or whatever it is. And so they are going to make evidence-based decisions. They want to target whatever the real audiences are. So I come into projects to be, maybe after they've passed several gateways and we're definitely building this project, and okay, we need the mobile guy to come in here and tell us what we're doing. And they've already got, say, analytics in the existing website, or they've got some market share studies for their region in Asia. They've already got this stuff, and they're saying, well, we're going to build it for Android, or BlackBerry, or some crazy old ass version of Windows Phone, because that's what our users are using. So this is not even, so if you're sitting there with your friends doing your little startup and you're only doing iOS, you're missing out on stuff. Or any platform. Any assumptions that make you comfortable are potentially worrisome. If you design based on perception or love or religion or hearsay, well, you're missing opportunities. I'll say it that nicely instead. And why does it matter? Well, it's not just that short-term stuff. It's that there are lots more devices than just saying let's pick up a couple. I've got lots of these. It's Android and iOS, and oh, believe it or not, I spent a lot of time working on BlackBerry. If you look at the stats, there's lots of BlackBerry users in some regions. It's thinking about all these other devices. There are not just tablets, whether we argue those are mobile or not is another issue. There's TVs that are connected. There's game devices that are connected. When you look at the numbers, a lot of them have been bandied around about here today, that we're going to sell 1 billion smartphones this year. You look at the numbers. Africa maybe has 9% smartphone penetration rate. Maybe. That's the high end. It's probably 4 or 5%. That's the number I go with. That's not just going to grow in smartphone sales, but it's going to be growth of smarty pants information devices in the future. What are they going to be? I have no idea. Could be anything. So you build the stretch to those new goals. I'm working on a project actually for information sharing stuff that's social in Africa, which I won't get much more detailed on. And one of the things I'm kind of targeting is desktop websites, which might sound crazy in general, but sounds even probably crazier off the top of your head to anybody who actually works in developing markets, because there's no desktop computers. There's fewer of those connected than there are mobiles. But they're putting in data lines. So these people who can afford smartphones to use this new product thing are going to at least some of them be information workers. They're going to have desktop computers in their desk in the next 5 years until that's replaced with some other crazy technology. So I could be wrong. That might totally be wrong. But by addressing a small mobile thing and a big mobile thing and a thing strapped to a desk and a TV, I've probably covered my bases. I've got at least the gist of some patterns that I can use to exercise. And if something insane comes out and 30% of people in Africa have kind of these weird mid-sized, I'm just dreaming this up now, the mid-sized TVs that you control entirely with gesture and voice, well, okay, I can tack on the gesture and voice interfaces, but I got the scale and the fact that it's bolted to the wall versus mobile already baked into some of my existing choices. One of my other artifacts I brought, paper. Need to think about everything. So multiple products. Sorry, the audio here is really killing me. Not just multiple screens, but everything. Voice. Calling each other, calling the customer care center, SMS, which has been mentioned a lot. I won't rant about because it's already been mentioned very well, but I love. Great system everybody uses. Think about when you're doing the interfaces, things like bits of paper. My classic one has always been the customer care center. What did you screw up and that they don't know, that doesn't transition between states and they write down little pieces of paper and stick to and hold on to for 30 seconds while they switch screens. This is one that I got during the trip. The bill that you get when you check out the hotel slid under your door. It's fine, it's not great. But this one has my room number written in pen on the back of it. I think, yeah, we're all designy enough, we can figure out why that is. So they can go around. Well, we can solve that. This system, this is one I assume, if they could get around using this crappy bill printing system, they probably would, instead of doing this hack to it. But they can't. It's part of their corporate system. They have to bill people. They're required to. If they don't, they're fired by their boss. What about the system you're building is so dumb that people will not even bother hacking around it. They'll just use a competitor system. They'll stick to paper notebooks. Okay. So when we get out of the crazy parts, and it's easier to handle, if it's just these two very different phones, and it has to be the same basic interface across both of them. Okay, well, we could be talking about, say, responsive design, right? Probably. First, good to keep in mind where things come from, I say. I'll get to buzzwords are fine. I like them. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But history is really good. Actually, since they brought up my book thing already, I'll mention that one again. There's about a third of the book is appendices about things like how mobile radio networks work. Really deep, dark, crazy stuff. How physiology works, how your eyeball works, so you know what sizes to see things. I think it's even good for process stuff, though. Responsive design, to me, well, one, it's just a word that was dreamed up by, what's his name? I wrote it down somewhere. Somebody knows. Marcotte, somebody? Anyway, for an article around some current trends. But when I saw it, I was not at all excited. Like, I almost missed it when it first came out, because it looked exactly to me like fluid design from 10 years ago, the time that CSS Zen Garden became a big deal. And then when I was writing this deck up, I realized, wait, when that happened 10 years ago, or whenever, 7 or 8 years ago, whenever that was, I wasn't excited about it then as a trend, because we'd already been doing it since like 97. We did percentage sizes in tables, and God help us, frame sets, and built bizarre little things. I built a button that the company actually took and tried to patent, that was like made of tables and weird scalable graphics and all kinds of crazy stuff, so that we could but for the same reason that we're doing it today, we could flow data into things, deal with everybody's screen from 640 by 480 to 1900 TV screens in the stores to present the same information no matter what was going on. Principle's the same there, which means, it doesn't mean, oh, screw the guys promulgating, I assume that's will be fine, promulgating any particular buzzword now like responsive design. It means you don't have to dream it all up from fresh. You can look at old design patterns, old principles, read up on a 10-year-old article about designing for multiple screen sizes, and a lot of this stuff will apply to you today. Really kind of convenient. So we don't have to all learn from zero every 5 years when some new trend comes up. Yeah. So the only thing that I have an issue with a lot of the pure responsive type stuff is that it's all client side. There's some other issues with it kind of jumping, we pick sizes. The new Dreamweaver, for example, isn't really responsive the way I like it, where you pick percentages and rules and things go. You kind of pick a couple sizes, and then you jump between those sizes, and you have to pick them up front. If you realize another one later, you're kind of screwed and have to start over. But the big problem is, especially for mobile stuff, is that they're doing everything at the client side. So you take your 2 meg masthead image, and you scale the size up and down, and you put in 75 lines of JavaScript to make it do all that stuff. And I've absolutely seen people do that so that it will work on, say, a feature phone. Which is not one of the ones I brought. I should have brought some of my terrible test feature ones. It won't even render. It won't even bother. Sometimes, even today, when they're a lot better, I can't remember who was mentioning earlier that even the dumb phones almost all of them, have pretty good web browsers. There's a limit. They will sometimes go so far as to crash the phone if you give it enough stupid stuff. But also, nobody's going to sit there for 5 minutes wasting all of their minutes. They don't, or their data minutes, whatever they call them in their market. They don't have that. They aren't going to put up with it. So you do server-side detection. You put on something like Wurfel, and you send over the right data and all that. That's great. And that probably sounds like, and somebody can help me there. You pronounce that? I've never actually heard anybody say it. Is it RES or RESS? Nobody knows. Okay, I'll probably say it because I like saying things more than spelling them out. So before 4 or 5 months ago, when that became a big deal, getting people to do server-side detection was a total uphill battle. Nobody had got the gist of it. You had to explain it and give them all the pros and cons. Yay. So this is a great one. Buzzwords are really helpful. Now we can throw this out. They can go like this, and they go, oh, okay, got it. No problem there. Or if I'm having an argument, I go, just read this article. That guy explains it a lot better, and it's great. There's some weirdness. It's very new, so it's a little bit like Ajax in the early days. Already is trying to implement exactly the particular implementations of it, but we'll get to the point where the principles actually work out fine too. So we're designed to lots of different sizes. Well, that really doesn't work when you get aspect ratios, because I was actually even to say, look at all the different aspect ratios, but whatever. At least they're different. This is not just a pretty picture thing. I can't remember the data set I grabbed. I think it's all the new Android devices launched in the first quarter of this year, something like that. No duplication to make it larger, no removals to make it smaller. I just put all those little sizes up there. And yeah, and don't take from that the wrong lesson that Android's terrible because of the scaling. We think we've already, half gotten across that it doesn't matter. If you design the right way, who cares about the scaling? You'll work it out. You're there once you get past classes. But then there's even more, of course. Almost all these devices turn sideways. So you double it for landscape, and then that's just one platform, and that doesn't count things like that are marginally on that OS principle, like all the Google TVs, I assume dozens that have been sold. I don't know anybody with one. But I did just say screen sizes, not pixel dimensions. Don't care. People, my finger does not work in pixels. None of these rulers are graduated in pixels. Real size thing. Your eyeballs also don't work that way. They see photons. I know you think that they see pixels, but they don't, trust me. If you zoom in far enough, you'll see that pixels are really funny shapes. You'd notice if you could see pixels. You see photons that are all blurred together and stuff. And so once you get past loving your really high resolution screen, that I actually haven't seen one today. Somebody's got to have the new MacBook, but once you have the new iPads and stuff, it doesn't matter. In many cases, I actually find you don't need the new high resolution screens to test stuff as long as the physical dimensions are the same. You measure in physical sizes. So one of those isn't a real physical size. An M, by the way, anybody who calls it an EM just hasn't worked around boring old people like me, typographers. It's an M. It's just how you pronounce it. But it needs a baseline thing, and the baseline needs to be a physical unit, not a pixel, because pixels fail you. Pixels are electronic units. They're not reproducible. So I've actually been using these exactly, and I have more of them, but that's basically because I'm a nerd and I collect stupid things like rulers. So, these to measure scales. I've shown a few of you already. That's gotten so tedious, I went ahead and made up a little thing myself, expensively laser cut, but go look me up and you can buy one yourself if I get enough pre-orders. That lets you, measure things like touch targets and type size and stuff for mobile phones. It's more of the useful scale for that stuff. And somebody will probably say, well, pixels work fine. Device-independent pixels is kind of a trend coming around now, whether they call them that or not. Pixel doubling for certain major OSs and so forth. Again, a hack for the reality challenged. If you can't get around, you must deal in pixels. No, we're building stuff for real world, for real people. I think that's actually a slide out of that. We're building stuff for real people, working in the real world. That's the kind of thing, that's kind of what mobile is to me when you get to those definitions, is they're contextually used. You carry this around, but you actually look at it with your eyeballs and you poke it with things. It doesn't matter what it does digitally to me, as if it doesn't work for people actually poking it with stuff. So use real units of measure, even the OSs, and unless I'm missing something for some new variation or release or something, every OS I worked on, at least some deep dark world has some unit of measure. Some of them are weird, like a TWIP. Go look up that sometime. No, the older Symbian systems use TWIPs as a measure, which are these ridiculously tiny little, like 20th of a point units. But, it's a physical unit, and you can do the math to figure out what size your thing is. Okay, past scale. That's the other thing that kind of gets me about responsive, is it's all about scale. And actually, anything responsive like res. The only difference between this phone and this phone, or this computer, is that the screens are different sizes. Well, clearly not. They have a bunch of other stuff. So we'll get to that. So this is a typical IA diagram kind of thing. Just a bit of it, and it's sanitized. So if there's an error in it, that's not real. It's just because I threw it in this presentation. So they told us build a sharing tool, and it has email. So you build an email page, and you build an email confirmation page, and probably there's a bunch of error pages and stuff like that. Of course, everybody does that. Why would you do that on mobile? There's an email client built into it. Well, because we don't link to the email client on desktops, right? Because those are stupid. They don't know who you are. and it always launches the Thunderbird app that you installed 2 years ago because you had to do some mail merge thing, and that isn't even set up right. But mobiles aren't really like that. They're pretty contextually aware, so they can actually, this actually works, and therefore it's become the expected method. People press the share button, and they get to choose what they want to share with. This is, big example, but you always get at least an SMS or email link, so use that thing. And suddenly, you didn't have to build all this stuff. You met the user's expectation for doing this stuff, and if you start doing that all the time, you get free maps. You don't say, send us an email, you put a link in and they can call customer care directly. They can link directly to the App Store. Not by going, not go to the website and then press the little teeny button in the corner. They can just go to the App Store. This is, skip that one. Sorry, I thought it was right away. I've memorized my presentation wrong. Okay, I'll start over. Anyway, the responsive principles are still solid. We're not bucking it. I'm not saying responsive is all, or anything like that is all screwed up because they don't address anything outside of scale. No, they focused on scale. This is the obvious one. Mobile phones are small. They're troublesome because they're small, and therefore we must make things scale to different sizes. That's by no means the most important thing. Respond to whatever is going on, whatever capability your device has. This is just the ones off the top of my head that I've been using on the last couple projects I'm on. Little icons I use in those diagrams to say, go do this stuff. There's some more of them, and again, when I mentioned the wiki, I've got the way to use some of these in code. If you can't figure it out, some of that I've started testing myself because nobody's gathered them in one place, or the tests I found are 4 years old, so I started doing some of that myself. So again, look it up and I will give you more information about that if you need it. Okay. A bunch of people are nodding or giggling about things, yes, let's do that. So why isn't everybody doing that? And by the way, anybody can interrupt at any point and say, you're completely full of crap, or I know why, and answer the question. Well, I say it's because of what we're working at. Well, design, we build the principle, we fundamentally do everything off principles. We go get patterns that apply to our project thing. We build templates, design those really well, and then somebody, probably developers, build pages and they actually get the thing out there. The responsive types of approaches to things, like when I mentioned the Dreamweaver thing, are at template and, if you're lucky, pattern level. We need to get work up higher. We need to be approaching this stuff at that IA diagram, like I showed you before, at almost a principle level. Like this. I'm sorry, I keep hitting the microphone. This is probably typical to a lot of people. This is as agile as agile can get, but this is true even for any old process thing. My usual thing when I use this slide is to go, where did all these cards come from? I've got another picture where we were consolidating them, and there's a stack of cards that's this thick sticking out from the wall because we kept stacking up the duplicates. We had about 50 in over time. Zillions of these things. So these are, we come up with ideas, we put them down, we make sure everybody agrees to them. They got little titles and little descriptions and little dependencies and all that stuff. And then what do we do with them? They get evaluated and scoped, and this is what we're going to build. And the evaluation scoping, it assumes every card is one page. Always. That's how you end up with email being a page in the system. The one I worked, this particular project I worked on, I spent a huge amount of time, besides the fact it's a nice picture, it's one of the reasons I pull it up, is it was it wasn't, but it was kind of a bookmark management tool, a file management tool thing. It took a lot of arguing to make people understand, no, that's going to be a list with lots of state changes and a few pop-ups and things like that. And what do you know, when the mobile app team, after I got done with this thing, got a hold of it, it ended up being a whole bunch of click and frames slide in and back and forth stuff, what do you know? Oh, well, I lost my place for the notes, so I'll just start yammering at you guys randomly like everybody else has been doing. Well, he apologized. He didn't mind saying that. Okay, so like I said, you have to design, raise the thing up to, if not a principal level, at least kind of an architectural level. Take all those features, sure, put them out there, but don't design the interface don't design a particular interface. Don't make the assumption that that thing is a particular screen. Make sure that it's possible on any platform, but then and perform the UX evaluation processes aside without considering the platform dependencies, the platform independent bits of things. I'm trying to do a short version of my design for every screen principles, but it's really hard to shorten it down too much. Basically, I'll just skip the thing and say it off the top of my head instead. Before you do an IA diagram, this thing I like to make, I just decided to call it blueprint just to give it another name, where it's like a pre-IA diagram, where you put in all that stuff. So the email does have a little screen, but then you mark it and you know that's only for people who need a screen. It's a functional feature, not necessarily a screen. And then you branch the design to each and every individual screen, platform, interface, whatever you want to call it. And at that point, you break it up and decide, and start addressing those individual needs. So that simple example I used, the desktop web has a link over to, has a page for the email. But the mobile web and the mobile app launch the email client directly and load the data into there. It's a terrible simple example, but that's it. Okay, so back to the one I said, like, this is a much smaller screen than this, so it's clear, and this one's even bigger. So this is best, this is pretty good. Or here, I'll make it more comfortable for you guys. This one's iOS. This one's pretty darn good, and this one's better because it's the biggest one. I tend to go, if anything, the opposite, that the mobiles are better because they have all their sensors and stuff. They do all those neat capabilities. But almost more increasingly, I don't do anything. I don't do mobile first, desktop first, anything. Just say everything's got its positive features. I'm not sure what this is supposed to be. So, unlike what I said earlier, where I said everything's got all the buzzword-worthy principles have got their bonuses and benefits. Now, some of them start falling by the wayside. Graceful degradation and progressive enhancement don't mean anything in this world to me. I never use them because I don't go, this is the baseline, this is worse, this is better. There's a core thing that you may or may not, that never gets built. It's just a core concept, architectural concept, and everything branches out to it independently. There's nothing wrong with the simple way that menuing systems work on BlackBerry, which is dead, so I can't turn it on. It's just the way it works. And if you treat it like it's a second-class citizen, the BlackBerry guys are going to notice. The users, they're used to it, the way that their menuing system works. So if you build it in kind of a crappy way, if you put the menu items in an order that makes sense in some other universal heuristic way, but it's not the BlackBerry way with the close button at the very bottom of the list, they're going to notice, and then they'll be unhappy and they'll stop using the app. And these are not surmised. Some of the stuff, we've thrown stuff in front of typical users in the last few months, and they hated the one that we ported over to the other platform. They noticed that, the Android, the back button here didn't work, and it had an iOS back button up there. And that, I don't care if it's got an arrow that says back, that baffled the crap out of them. That didn't work at all. So, okay. When you start considering features at that general level, like I said, you got this IA diagram, it's everything. You can totally start getting to feature creep. I admit that. You can't do it off the cuff. You can't do it by just looking at the cards on the wall, and you're not going to find that it's going to narrowing down, deciding what this whole interface is going to happen is going to be done by the technical architects or the business owners, or it's not going to be done at the steering committee or any of those gateway things. You're going to have to put some design down, maybe even prototype stuff, but definitely put down, and that's why I said the blueprint thing, I've got that. You have to build something so you can watch that user journey through it. I tend to do things that look like those IA diagrams, big, giant, sketchy piece of paper on the wall, like Aaron showed us, or didn't show us because they're too cool, apparently. Those are great. Use those a lot. Rooms like this, you cover the whole thing in whiteboard and draw out the whole diagram and stick little things up next to it. Are really good ways to get or any of those other exercises, the customer journey type things to help inform it, are really useful things. You need to think about how they're going to go through the entire system in the biggest term of it possible, not the app you're building, but the big system, the whole thing. So Oh, and that's that thing. How do you decide the big decisions? Organically, I tend to say. You don't just go, are we meeting this feature or not? You have to design the thing and actually watch how people would flow through the system. So if there's a breakpoint, if there's a feature that doesn't seem to comply with the goals, then it's probably wrong. But you can't decide that by looking at the feature card. You need to look at it the way this organically, intrinsically to the system. Another example. Love this one. One of the apps we're building now, which is actually the only one that's iOS. When I said that the only one that's iOS first, it's this one, is designed to be used down a mine shaft. Seriously, one of our key use cases is very far off road or seriously in a mine where they use these particular products. There's no network coverage. So we're not building, to buck that trend that I said earlier, build a mobile website first. We're not building a website because you wouldn't have access to it on the mobile where people need the thing now. Building an app, it's all local storage. And that came up by starting to do the design stuff, figuring out what kind of data people were accessing. And even though you'd think that we could have figured this out early on, they had the basics, but they kept saying, well, it'll be syncing data access. And we started drawing it and we went, oh, except these people can't do these lines don't work for a bunch of the key use cases. Seems obvious, but it didn't work until you got the lines in there. I find that kind of stuff, that's a kind of extreme example. I don't build a lot of things that are designed to be used deep underground. But that kind of thing I find all the time, that stuff you go, in retrospect, of course we should have noticed that. Absolutely, you don't notice it until you start diagramming out that customer experience end to end and actually checking out how it's going to work. So for this one, we're building an app that'll go with the paper catalog and the CD you pop into the desktop computer and the website they already use in their trailers. But that's all we're building for those guys. I'm probably running out of time, so I'll go really quickly on these things. Just some other definition things. I keep saying products instead of projects, and I also tend to say customers instead of users. The exact terms aren't important, but they do bug some people sometimes. So like if you're building non-commercial products, a lot of people don't like it when you say customers, but I still like some term better than users of your system and just saying user generically. So customers versus prospects is sometimes useful, whatever other term you have, really useful to kind of get into that thing. Products is a little bit higher. It's more like thinking program level versus project level, but just again to consider stuff in a different way. If you talk about the project the whole time, then you're going to tend to think very narrowly. And if you are very clever and don't get caught up into that semantics, changing your mind thing, the project team might well have that problem otherwise. So it kind of helps. Analysis stuff. So you take all that stuff and you did a great analysis and you start branching and you build those little individual platforms. How do you tell if it's still any good? You need to formally evaluate it. So I mentioned earlier that you have project goals. There's a reason the thing exists, and hopefully it's measurable. Even if you can't measure, say, take rate at when it's not launched, you can at least fake it. You can apply all those standards to the design and try to figure it out. Wait, I think that's another one. And if you find out that something's gone wrong, not always do you want to change the design. You might well find out that something doesn't meet. The standards seem wrong. The principles or goals seem wrong. That's fine. But you need to do that very, very, very explicitly again. You need to be aware or knowledgeable why you're doing this stuff. And then you go back and you change the project goal, if it's at all possible. Sometimes that's hard to do. But you deliberately change the project goal and you tell everybody that, and then you reevaluate the whole project. Okay, now to the home stretch thing. Implementation is key to, of course, getting all your products out. And I don't just mean because they're the guys who own the printing presses or whatever. That's how you get your crazy pie in the sky idea out there. I mean that they need to be involved all throughout the process. And to me, that their process needs to be deeply integrated into your process and preferably customized to whatever project you're working on. In the same way that I talked about my presentation style, is evaluate based on whatever is what the current process is and whatever's going on trend wise and what the current audience I'm talking to hopefully is. Same thing for design deliverables and design processes and development processes. Using generic ones aren't going to be necessarily the greatest thing in the world. And actually, I should probably start aside also again and say I'm going to keep saying implementation instead of development because it's not just code writing. There's a lot of stuff going on, and this is another one kind of like doing the card equals feature equals page, and you just build it by rote. You consider development the only people downstream. You're going to miss update processes, how it gets into the store, actually hosting and data services, and what you end up with is maybe let's say it's built perfectly otherwise and the code is clean, it's bug free, it's still slow as crap, or nobody can update the content on it. You need a new release to change the phone number. This isn't stuff, no matter how clever you are, no matter how much you're backed in data sources. I've been essentially a DBA in a past life. I have some pretty different opinions than a lot of designer stuff, and I still will constantly forget about deep problems with technical implementation if I don't engage the team on that thing. So since I just mentioned a lot of those things, data and services are the first stream you have to go to, which would seem the first thing you're going to launch is that. Well, maybe not launch is the right word, but instead of the web, the first thing you got to get people to build is all this back-end software stuff. If you're actually building, you separate out the layers, whether it's web, app, multi-platform, doesn't matter, and assuming you have data services, it's not like a game that's completely 100% resident on the device, but there's still some truth to this anyway. It's separate out in your basic layer thing, and you have data source, software layer, and presentation layer. The first thing you got to do is build the data and then the software layers. And then you layer the UI on top. The web is just the first of a series of things you do, so that you're future-proofing the thing. Even if you're building one platform right now, because that's all you have the money for, you do have a narrowly focused market and you're sure, how hard is it going to be to launch that second platform when you get around to that? It's sort of impossible. You're going to end up being one of these people that no matter how many billions your company is worth, it takes you a year and a half to launch on the second platform because you completely start from scratch. And that's an example that I like to use because I don't care how much you're worth. How much more would it be good if you were on 2 or 3 or 5 platforms? And that gets so deep I won't even get into it. But yeah, lots of problems emerge. I have a funny animated chart that I did before that. Screw it. Yeah, I've already covered this stuff. I'm trying to go quick so I don't take too much time, and I have enough time for you guys to ask questions and stuff. But efficiency is what we were just talking about there. Yes, do it all once if you can. There's another bit of efficiency that's worth mentioning, but I'll only do it very briefly because there's way more smart data guys and security guys around here too, which is loading, if you're talking about services stored in the cloud or on your server back at your home, whatever you want to call it. And it's kind of related to the REST stuff I was talking about earlier too, of sending all the data you need to the handset. That's another thing you should probably be considering, in implementing the layers of development stuff correctly. Don't do all the processing up on the handset if you can. Don't send all that data there. It's heavy and pointless. It slows things down. You can do all kinds of great stuff. Actually, I bet you didn't. Most people don't know that voice, when you talk into one of these handsets, it's sending the voice as a data encoded stream, and all the smarty stuff is happening on servers somewhere else, not in the handset. So locate the data and the software layers as close together as possible. Put them in the same data center, at least buy big expensive fiber pipes to go between the two, and then send just the presentation layer stuff up to the handset. Much quicker. And also, another one that's increasingly important, secure. You're not sending all the secret sauce stuff up there. You're not storing all that customer data up on the handset. You just send little teeny bits of presentational code. If, let's say, somebody's snooping and sees every bit of your bank account stuff up there, it's only whatever's on the handset. Might not, if you send giant amounts of data to be processed and analyzed to make like charts of your finances, they've got a lot more information. Okay. So then, what you're doing, like I said, you're inheriting. You're simplifying what you have to build by building the software layers once. But every platform team should cheat. And I think I heard a question earlier when I was trying to focus on something else about platform teams versus building for individual platforms versus doing a write once tool of any sort. So this is assuming that each platform is approached individually, which is best for a lot of reasons. I've worked in the write once tools. I do that more than anything. You end up with lots of buggy things, and at least at your level as somebody who cares about the final product, whether you're a designer or not, you're in some management role and you want all the products to look customized even if they're not, you're going to end up having to approach them each as individual swim lanes anyway, even if it's a write once tool. There's going to be customizations for each platform. There's going to be tests individually for each platform. So the basic truth is there. Don't worry about that, was it? So I have a lot more of these things. Comparing the charts, this is my favorite way to do development process. So like I said earlier, where even though I'm a designer, I end up trying to influence all the process all the way through to make sure that it actually gets implemented right. My favorite there is what I'm calling the staggered approach, which some people have seen. A few of you have probably not seen it. I keep presenting this though to like development managers, and I'm off the camera, out behind a pillar, and who go, "That's amazing. I've never seen anything like that. Can I get a copy to put on the wall?" Okay, whatever. So in this one, designy stuff, since it's small, I know, I'll just point out. Designy stuff up top, blueprint, like I said, that RIA, and then you build, this one's called shared services, but all that software and data storage stuff first. First stream is the mobile web, like I said, and then you notice each other platform is staggered down there. So anything that these guys did wrong, or I did wrong because I didn't specify it, we can fix it and tell the next team who can shorten their development and test cycles. So your most important platforms go first, so that if you have to cut off development because you got to make a timeline, then who cares about the last platforms? But also they get giant amounts of time to bug fix anything that happens. Simple. But maybe not for you. Almost don't care. I like it. Great. I tend to put that out as the first step one. Maybe it's not right for your team though. You have to, the main thing is take all these conceptual processes, take the trends, and look at how your team works. What's the corporate culture? What's the development organization like? What products are you building? If you're only launching on one product right now, then there's a bunch of these core things that are good principles, but do you need a staggered development approach thing? Probably not. You probably just send the one guy into one corner and the other guy into another corner and manage them that way. Actually, you probably shouldn't do almost anything I've done exactly. And one reason I can say that comfortably is I don't do everything I do exactly from project to project. I drift over time. So much so I actually have another book that most people don't talk about design process. I don't even bother bringing and showing it much anymore. I use little bits of it, but the overall process has changed almost completely in 3 years. Partially learning, partially the world changes, but a lot of it is in any individual project. Any individual team culture is going to have different pressures, different needs, and so every time you approach something new, you have to learn and adopt that stuff. That's why we come to meetings and stuff like this. But anyway, I'm sure that's not good enough for you, so I'll try to boil it down to a couple little bullet points. Everybody likes bullet points to take home to their boss and say, this is what we're going to do, right? I already waved my arms at this one. We take design, makes choices based on good principles, develops or uses patterns based on the user needs and business goals for your individual organization, project, or process, or wait, not program. See, I already lost. There's too many P words. I've lost it. And build solutions based on schedules and business or technology limits. Your organization should, and this isn't development, your whole organization should likewise correspond to your organizational culture. That you take the principles to tell roughly what you're going to do. You form practice areas and general approaches to how you're going to do stuff, and then from that evolve the tactics that you actually need to kind of cover the range of stuff. One is getting information to people no matter what. And so it's users of, actually this one isn't particularly secret, so it's the Cummins, which is my day job for the next 2 weeks, getting they're actually opening the market too, which again isn't terribly secret, but maybe I'm not supposed to be talking about that, that they don't have a lot of market there, so it's not like there's existing processes in place. So mobile's supposed to be possibly an interesting feature there, because they don't have a dealer network, and therefore lots of people with paper manuals and stuff. They're going to be all new so they can get a new technology. But there's, like I think I said earlier, I can't remember if I said that out loud when I was up here earlier, that they have this ridiculously low penetration rate for smartphones. So, and I've done some other projects in the past where when we know stuff like there are multiple SIMs, multi-SIM users, there are ridiculously low use rates per day. So you don't want you can't have rich media, you can't have web browsing. So we're trying to get the data out in whatever way is possible, like SMS response is stuff I'm pushing for. And I haven't launched any of these, so this is, so if you don't see it there, it's not lying. I just want you to know this is me going, here should be your strategy for the emerging market areas. You need to do things like have SMS response and have native voice, but like call customer care in native languages, but don't assume it's going to work right. And if you have SMS chat, make sure again that it's in not pure native languages, but it's in the SMS language, which is usually English plus local colloquialisms, and that's good luck finding those people, at your typical customer care center in India or something. Blah blah. Okay, that kind of thing. Do whatever you can to do low bandwidth, but get the information out there to people. The second one is about trying to explore that smartphone. Something's going to take off. The short term, the official mandate was smartphones are going to take off in Africa specifically. And it was, if I knew the countries, I probably couldn't tell you anyway, but it's a provider of telecom services throughout anyway, let's just say throughout Africa and the Middle East. So it's a bunch of them. So it is actually taking a generalized view of stuff. And for the way that we're dealing with it, as far as the growth of smartphones, it does tend to be, as much as it sounds bad and we're painting with a broad brush, they tend to have broadly similar say penetration rates of smartphone and broadly the same problems with backhaul, getting data to the country at all. So we're doing everything kind of the same way. And it's about mostly, and again, choosing my words carefully so I don't let on what the project is, taking existing services, existing low bandwidth services, and making them work on smartphones in the same way I've been talking about here. Not just, and now we will take this and put it on the smartphone screen and make it, it will have gradients and stuff, but actually give it more rich data in ways that are the way the smartphone works, to make it appealing so people bother to use it. And you don't have to just have like operators force them to use it, because we said we want to go to IP data versus messaging, signaling. Oh yeah. And that's why I said the one about the information workers, that the information problem, since I didn't repeat the comment thing, so the infrastructure problem is going to change the marketplace just in the next probably the next 5 years. They're laying cables still and stuff. There are people promising to do satellite, but I have latency problems make satellite backhaul a problem. But they're laying cables at a furious rate. So the place is going to be connected. And so you have to plan for the future. And then there are questions, of course, of are you going to end up with a digital divide of some sort? I mean, obviously huge, a lot of people with connected are going to be also in, relatively poor, let's say, disadvantaged, whatever. But are you going to end up with urban areas and rural areas, or are they going to do a relatively broad build out? Can't tell. All we can kind of see now is the ships are laying cables and they're building some stuff and everybody's starting to buy the devices. But what's the infrastructure to support it to? Don't know. So there's still going to be at the very least, a two-tier, of course, me like to say multi-tier support system. So you'll still have SMS and in parallel with full-bore IP data services. You can't switch over from one to the other. You can't make those kind of assumptions. And most people, I think, are the guys I'm working with are relatively aggressive compared to a lot. A lot of people are predicting things like in 20 years, 80% of people will have a smartphone. I know. In 3 years, we're going to have I think there's going to be a much higher usage rate of smartphones. To the point where I see an infrastructure problem emerging, that even if they build as fast as they can, I'll bet people are going to use it faster than they can put stuff up. And so you end up with the same problem. There's a bandwidth, no matter how many towers are, there's going to be a bandwidth problem again. They have smartphones they can't get any data to, and we're all used to that.